Hey guys, and welcome to the Project Millennial podcast. I am here with a special guest today. We are live in person at an amazing bar up in Cornelius, North Carolina called Boatyard Eats. And I'm here with John Smith, the Mortgage Smith, the man, the myth, the legend.
We're trying.
Yeah. And so we're here to talk about a lot of different things today, mainly how to get into real estate, how to own property, even at a young age, right? Even as a millennial, as someone that doesn't own any property, right? And I want to talk then about social media and how it's changing our society and how anybody can get on it and take advantage of it. So, John, I want to start with, how does someone get into owning property?
Well, they got to buy it. They got to buy property. To get into it, you got to have an interest. I mean, at some point, home ownership's going to just kind of be the natural path as you go through, coming out of a younger person. And, they come out renting through school or different phases of their life. But at some point, they go, you know what? There's a lot of good stuff associated with home buying, and I got to take advantage of it. So got to make the decision to be a buyer first, man.
There's no minimum age requirement to buy. You don't have to worry about, am I too young at 22, 23, 25 to own property
Well, there is a minimum age, and that's 18.
Yeah.
So you can be 18 and buy, and I've worked with buyers that are age 18
you
and
have?
buy. Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome.
In fact, is one of the youngest people, because you got to be minimum 18, and he'd even buy a house for himself. He bought an investment property. So this 18-year-old kid is ready to go out and buy investment property. So the minimum age is 18, but whether you're 20 or 22, man, it's time to buy.
I love it. And you know what? So I actually have a number of friends of mine that are getting investment properties before they even buy their own home.
Yep.
It's amazing that's out there. So what are some of the tricks of the trade in doing that at a young age?
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the things that works is because you can use that future rental income immediately. It didn't used to be that way, but about 2 years ago that changed. So you can use future rental income. And what I mean by that is, so you buy a house, right? You buy a house, and let's say that mortgage payment, taxes, insurance, everything, $1,000. We'll make it easy, right? $1,000.
Yeah.
But when the appraisal is done on that home, they also do something called a rent analysis schedule.
Yep.
So that rent analysis will say what rent is going for in the area. And let's say rent's going for $1,500. Then you can right away use that as qualifying income to buy the house, even though you haven't received any yet. You can get it as rental income, and that offsets that $1,000. And in underwriting and getting a mortgage, we're going to offset that. So it actually even makes it a little bit easier to qualify buying an investment property than your primary, because you get to use money you haven't even realized yet.
So just because you found the right property in the right location that has great potential for rental income can help you qualify for that loan. I mean, that's awesome. I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
And I think what's great about that is that if you have the eye of being an investor, that's something that interests you. I love that's how you start. You got to have that interest, really, to get into real estate. I think that's something a lot of my generation doesn't realize that should be so important, because they don't teach it in schools, right? They don't teach us stuff in school. They don't say, hey, you should own real estate, or you can own real estate before you're 30. Everybody thinks it's you got to wait to do that. No, you can go out and do that right away. Matter of fact, I see a lot of people that go out and buy an investment property for themselves. What happens, you'll find a 4-bedroom house or something, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And you're 24, 25, right out of college, and you got a couple buddies of yours that, you guys going to room together, and you're probably going to rent together, right?
Right.
What if you bought the house, and then now maybe your monthly payments are $1,400, $1,500, but you got 3 roommates and you're charging them $500 a piece, which is really cheap for rent, right? To basically, room together. And now guess what? Your mortgage is gone. You're actually probably making money.
Right.
And guess what? After everyone moves out, you sell it 3, 4, 5 years later, you cash in on your $15,000 that you made in equity.
Right. And
you're better for it. And I see plenty of people doing that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, totally, Nick. Because what you just described, in my opinion, is a 6-letter word. Not a 6-letter word, and that 6 letters, W-E-A-L-T-H, wealth, man.
Yeah.
You're talking about building wealth at that point, because what you're doing is you're leveraging a property that's going to be building equity. You're going to have someone else pay for it, and then you're right. A lot of people, I just don't think, I didn't know I could do that. I kind of knew I could do it, but I never really thought, is that really something that I can do? And the truth is, absolutely. There is programs for it. For your first-time home buyer, you can take advantage of. you can use incomes if you have a track record of doing that in the past. If no big deal. But there are some programs that will let you use the first person with just a signed agreement, and that will help again with qualifying. I mean, so absolutely, what you're doing at that point is you're making a decision. You're not just making a decision to buy a house, Nick, man. You are making a decision to create wealth. And the younger you start doing that and putting your mind like buying houses a wealth position, you're way ahead of the game, man.
You're so right on that. You're ahead of the game. I keep coming back to that. It's a conversation I keep having with so many people who say, well, Nick, man, what you've done at 22, coming on 23, what you've done at, your age. He's like, I didn't do till I was like 30 something. And man, you're so ahead of the game. And I appreciate those compliments, I don't view it that way. For me, I view it as it's more of a lack of education on the part of my generation, right? It's there's not enough of us. I shouldn't be ahead of the curve, is what I'm saying. Like I really not that special. I really feel that it's just more of our generation should know to do these things. This should be public knowledge. So that's the reason I have this podcast, is really to educate my fellow millennials and motivate those to, hey, you can do all of these things no matter what your situation is. There's always a way about it. And so that kind of takes me to my next point that I want to cover, which was social media and what's happening with our society and how it's changing. Do you think it's too late for someone to get in the game? Because I actually just had a client the other day who was consulting about marketing and everything with our marketing business.
Yeah. And
she said to me, Nick, I'm in my late 50s. I'm too late. I don't even want to touch Facebook or Instagram or any of that stuff. I'm too late. I don't want to do it. And I said to her, honestly, nobody's too late. My grandmother, 90-year-old Italian grandmother's on Facebook now, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
She's emailing people and messaging, and she loves it. It's all about connection. So talk about social media, how it's changing, how it's not too late for anybody, kind of like getting started.
Well, the thing about social media that I said is it just it makes everything an even level platform. Okay, anybody can register for your social media platforms, and they can then broadcast your message just like that. And as big as you want to is just by pumping up that content in terms of quality and quantity of that content. But what I'm getting at is, man, anybody can do it. It levels the playing field. So it doesn't matter whether you're 18 years old, as we already kind of touched on, or 58 years old. It is a level playing field, and age doesn't make a difference as long as you're putting out good quality and a quantity of content on social media. It doesn't make a difference.
So content's important. Being consistent with your content's important, right? Give us a couple other tips. So when you're getting started, it's a networking. Social media is all about networking, right? Should you go add people that to Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram? What's a good way to get your message out if you're brand new?
Yep, sure, absolutely. Well, I say the best social media platform to use is the one that you are familiar and comfortable with. That's what it is. When people say, oh, this, do this on Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, there's so many. But the best one to use is the one you are comfortable with, because that's the one you're going to use. So start out on that platform there. So if it's Facebook, and I think that probably has the easiest learning curve, Nick, would you say?
Well, Facebook is very, there's a lot of layers to Facebook. It depends on how deep you want to get into it, really, but you're right. It's like the Dolly Parton challenge, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Tinder, whatever, right? And I think what's unique about social media is that you can plug in as much or as little as you want, but it allows you to stay connected with people in your life, people in your sphere. So I want to get you do a rapid fire takeaways on your podcast. By the way, give a plug for your podcast.
Yeah. Charlotte Real Estate Buzz podcast. We're going to be rebranding that. Actually, the Be Greater Entrepreneur podcast. Okay. Let's do the Charlotte Real Estate Buzz podcast.
But what's the message? So I know he's got the hat here. Be Greater.
Yeah, Be Greater.
Be Greater Entrepreneur podcast. Tell me a little bit about it. Plug that a little bit.
Yeah. It's just a podcast that's going to feature folks that are doing things in the business that are true entrepreneurs, not order takers or people just kind of getting it through. True entrepreneurs that have a vision and are moving that needle forward. So it's just interviewing individuals of those. The focus is on real estate. So the majority of my interviews are with agents, doing dynamic things, bigger and better things that are above, and I recognize and I can see those. So I'm bringing those people in, but I'm also going across the country. I've gotten some big agents and influencers in the industry, and so now I want to even press it more, man. I want to get Grant Cardone, Gary Vee, man, on my podcast. We're going to do some big things, so it's going to be fun.
Wow. Well, look, hopefully I'll be on that podcast. I look forward to being on that podcast. I know I've been on your Real Estate Insiders podcast a few times. But do you want to leave everybody today with your best tips for branding? Because that's something that you're known as. You're the brand master. Look at all the swag that you got right here, man. I just have my shirt here, Sales Commanders. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I just think it's important that you create a brand. Make sure you are the brand. Don't let your company be the brand. Don't let who you are. I mean, if you're working for someone and they're driving your brand, I can tell you right now, you're doing it wrong. Yeah. You have to come out with your own brand. And so then the question might become, Nick, of like, well, what is that? Well, that's a very personal thing. I think that's an individual thing. You got to sit down and develop that individually, but it has to be real. My best tip I can give you, which I know sounds kind of vague, not trying to avoid giving something like super concrete, but it has to be something real that you are comfortable with and that you can plug into. What is your core about you, what you're about? When I do classes, I use the dog, the bounty hunter, Dog the Bounty Hunter. I use that a lot because it's a great example of branding. Yeah. Because when you think of him, he doesn't really have a logo or whatnot, but he absolutely has a brand, and the brand is about who he is, what he does, and what he's about. And so I think that's where it starts at.
So what I hear from you is message. Understand what's your why. Why do you do what you do? What drives you? What motivates you? What gets you out of bed? Like that's what motivates me. I'm so passionate about just like helping people and connecting and networking and knowing everybody and being that connector in the community. And so that's why I get up and I'm racing out of bed and on the phone, first thing in the morning, probably too early.
You are the connecting connoisseur, Nick.
I appreciate it.
There you go.
I'm gonna coin that and trademark it. Yeah, so you'll see that soon on the T-shirt on the back. So I appreciate you being on the podcast. John, where can the good people find you everywhere on social media?
Yeah, absolutely. On Instagram, @MortgageSmith, or you can go Facebook, John W. Smith, which is tough. But the best way, if you're an agent or an entrepreneur, the Charlotte Real Estate Insiders is a private Facebook group. It's a huge group. We got now pushing up on 1,200, and we just started it about 10 months ago. So a lot of people are coming out. We're doing some great content. So on Facebook, Charlotte Real Estate Insiders is a great way to connect with me too.
Awesome. Well, John, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. Again, this has been the Project Millennial podcast. And again, this is a podcast for millennials, by millennials, interviewing people who know a thing or two about social media and just growing your business. So get out there, go buy real estate, build wealth.
Build wealth. Thanks, Nick.